writers do well. But there's just as many writers, authors here in this part of the country where we're not doing as well. It's not as big of a thing. If you were in Virginia somewhere, Florida or South Carolina, book clubs are like huge. So there is a need for this here. And I know I'm called to be a part of making it more of what it should be. Okay? So what I want to do now, I didn't grow up knowing I was going to be a writer. It was something I discovered. So my first poem I wrote, I was in the 4th grade. I didn't even, 9, 10 years old. I lived in Compton. There's some flowers that open up starting at about 4 o'clock in the evening. And we had a bunch of them right outside on the sidewalk. Like when you walk out our door, there's a bush of them right there. And they grew, around the fence or whatever. They may have been for the neighbor or whatever. And every day around 4 o'clock, all day they stayed closed. And then around 4 o'clock they would start to open. And by nightfall they were wide open. And they are this brilliant reddish, pinkish type of color. And it was almost like they just lit up that spot. And then by morning, they would close up again. They did that every day. I didn't know what they were called. I called them the night flower because that's when they bloom. And it fascinated me so much, I wrote a poem called The Night Flower. Do I have it? No. But that was my first taste of inspiration. Right, being inspired by something, being touched in a way, and then writing about it. Words just came, and they came and they rhymed, and there was a rhythm and there was a flow, and I wrote it. That was my first time writing. After that, about 7th grade, first love, Ricky McFarlane. I had come across some poems in a book or something. There was one poem called, the first poem that really touched me it's called My Valentine. I believe the author wrote it for her little baby girl. My Valentine has eyes of deepest blue. That was the first line. And she went on to talk about her Valentine, which was her baby girl. Well, my Valentine had eyes of brown. So I took those words and changed them enough to match Ricky. And that was my poem to him. After that, just sporadically writing. I was always good in English, always good. My strongest subject all through school was writing, reading comprehension, and then I hit a spot in my 30s at work. I was married. I wasn't happy. My life had gotten to this point where you get to a point in your life where Bishop Jakes called it, you hit a wall. And I think we all hit walls from time to time. And I was walking up on a wall in my life and I didn't know. And I looked up and this little Cuban was standing there. And the first thing that came out to my mind was, I'd have an affair with him. And then I asked myself, did you just say that? And then I said, yeah. And that was the beginning of a turn. That was a turn in my life. I didn't have an affair with him. He never touched me. We were co-workers. But the first several points in this book, it was the first of a cycle of me writing my way through pain. Because when this happened, I was teaching YPWW on Sunday nights to the mothers, and they loved me. And I was over the youth choir that she sang in at Faith Delivers. My husband at the time was an elder, and he was the youth pastor. I was directing the youth choir. I was singing in Kansas City State Choir. I was an aspiring missionary, but already kind of thinking, why? But my life was, the Lord had to get me where He had to direct me to purpose. And that, what started that showed me something about God that I hadn't heard in church up to that point. And I learned that what I felt was the most sinful thing I could do, he did that to me. But it had to happen because there was things embedded in me that needed to come to the surface and be brought out so that they could be replaced with purpose. And it was the most pain I had ever felt in my life. And I felt like God had something against me, and he hadn't discussed with me what I had done to make him so upset, but that he held a grudge against me. And he waited until he could hurt me the most to get back at me. And he let that little Cuban walk into our office. And then he said, now I can get you. I felt like he was getting me back for something that he was upset with me about. That's how bad it hurt. And I said, I know how I feel about this person. I know what I'm going through, but the devil didn't do this to me. You did this to me, because the devil don't know me that's good. You're the only one that can know this stuff about me. And I felt like he took all my secrets and just showed them to everybody. I felt like he stripped me, and I had to write. So everything I felt, I had to write. That was the only way to get release. And I still didn't know I was a writer. I still didn't know I was a poet. That was pain. That was life leading me to today and to whatever else is going to happen in my life. And but then shortly after I started writing these poems, I was praying so hard, trying to understand what was going on. Pain drives you to God like nothing else. Then the poems in here started to seep out. God moved his hand. That was the first one. That was more about me kind of communicating with God. Like, it talks about how I felt, and I had gotten to a point where I was okay. Even though I was unhappy to be married, I looked around, if I was starting noticing people at church, most of them hookers wasn't seeming like they was all that happy. So maybe I had too much soap opera in my mindset still. Maybe I was tripping. Maybe people aren't really as happily married as I felt in my heart they should be. Maybe I had too much bliss, too much make-believe. So I said, okay, fine. If this is the way marriage is, I'll just be married and I won't expect to be happy. Cool. And I felt like, me and the Lord was cool. I wasn't giving him no trouble. He wasn't giving me no trouble. But then when that happened, I felt like, and that's what that point, God moves his hands, says. It's like, Lord, we was doing good. But I feel like you walked up behind me, tapped me on the shoulder, and then when I turned around, you slapped me in the face and hit me below the belt. What's up? And then his answer, the poem was like prophetic. It was like, the poem was like me expressing how I was feeling. But then when it got to the end of the poem, it was like the Holy Spirit, that's when I started realizing he helped me write. It was my tool. It was a healing instrument. And his answer to me through the poem was, I have something to give to you. Because it starts out, don't make me read it, because it's a part of the testimony. I'm trying to tell you how I got here. One day, one dreadful day, God moved his hand from over my heart, leaving it naked and exposed and vulnerable to the elements. And on that day, my heart, my poor, fragile heart, began a journey that would not end until it had been broken in every place. I looked up at him and I asked him, why? What did I do to deserve this? Why did you blindside me? Why did you walk up behind me, tap me on the shoulder, and then hit me below the belt and slap me across the face when I turned to answer you? I thought that we were getting along fine and that things were starting to even get better. Why did you turn on me? Then he answered and said to me, and this is when inspiration really kicked in. Up until that point, I was just crying out. But then that's when I really started, that was the beginning of me understanding he's the poet. He just shared the gift with me. Then he answered and said to me, because I have something to give to you. And though you can't see it now, I'm using this pain to prepare you for the beautiful gift that I have in store for you. I have something to give to you that when others see it, they will ask you why you have it. And you will say to them, oh God, because one day, one wonderful day, God moved his hand. So So it started out one day, one dreadful day, because that's where I was. But he's saying, when I get done with you, you're going to say one day, one wonderful day. There's purpose in pain. So that's, I'm telling you how I got to this point. So sometimes and it's easy to do in church because we're all about inspiration and the upside of living for God and everything. So when the pain hits, even if we've been in church all our life, when the pain hits, it still throws us off. But the quicker we learn to go straight to Him, there's purpose in it. There's a ministry in it. There's a calling in it. There's a platform for what He's going to give you. So, and then shortly after I started writing, He let me know you're going to separate these. And another thing I learned about God when I really started to understand He was with me in a way that I never had heard in church that He could be with me. These points came first, and then these began to kind of trickle in between. The more I cried out to Him, the more I prayed for understanding. Then He began to speak to me through the poems. So there's healing, pain, and there's healing. They came together. I didn't write all the romantic poems and then start writing inspirational poems. I didn't write all this and then got to a point where I got deep and then wrote these. These were mingled in. So what that taught me was, if you're in a situation as a Christian woman, as a praise and worship leader, where you really feel like, people don't talk about certain things. People don't share certain parts of their testimony. So unless somebody is transparent with you to share with you how they felt about somebody's husband sitting up in church leading praise and worship, you don't really know for sure if it's happening, right? So what that taught me was, while I'm going through things that I feel like as a Christian I should be, I had started the training to become licensed as a missionary in the Church of God in Christ. Then this foolishness started happening. So, but what I learned from God was He didn't leave me when I started feeling that way about some little Marine that was 17 years younger than me and he was a newlywed. There was something in me that needed to be brought to the surface, come out, healed, replaced with something else. He's what sets us apart from everybody else in the world. If it wasn't for Jesus, we ain't no better than the ratchet people. We ain't no better. We wouldn't be any different than anybody we think is ridiculous. It's Him that keeps us from being ridiculous. But we are capable of feeling everything that everybody else in the world feels. Growing up in the church, traditional black church, my God, you didn't even feel like we really fell in love with each other. We just got married because we was talking. And it's better to marry than to burn. That's what gets embedded in you. So when you actually feel something for somebody, you feel like you sinned. You feel like you're gonna go to sleep and you might just wake up in hell. But we're all, what sets us apart is Christ. That's and when we get into those places where we don't know what we're gonna do, it's Him that we have that sets us apart from how others. We don't grieve like the world grieves. We don't sorrow like the world sorrows. When we feel things we shouldn't feel, we do have a built-in go-to where the world might have hopelessness. We have a hope because we know who we can go to. So it takes people like me and people like you who will be a little bit more transparent and understand when you feeling something you shouldn't feel, He doesn't leave you. He's there to help you get through it. He's there to teach you what you need to know from it. He's there to teach you how to let Him be the guard over your heart or whatever the situation is. Everything is a learning experience, and out of everything, you can get something else for ministry. People say a lot of times your pain will pay you. It will. It will. Some of the most famous people, some of the richest people, if you hear their story, a lot of pain. But what they did with it, okay? So, as I was writing, He started to let me know with intimate things that book was going to start blessing couples. It was going to bless couples. When I would let people read the poem, I would be embarrassed while they were reading it. I was afraid of what their response would be. They loved it. Then my friends, co-workers, girl, I need a poem. They talking to some guy. Give me a poem. What you got? I'm going to send him a poem. I said, so I show him my little stuff, and they say, hey, well, I want that. Send him the poem. The responses were phenomenal. They didn't care that she got the poem from her friend at work. They liked the poem. They liked the fact that she read him a poem. And then I've had Well, one guy, woo, yeah, his response went sexual. Oh, just for her reading a poem over the phone, little made a comment to her. I'm like, well, bless God. Then other people were like, when they would read, there's a lot of melancholy in that poetry. All my secrets are in that poetry, just inside stuff. 30-something years old, but I was writing like a virgin. I was writing like somebody with absolutely no experience. And that's what happens to you when you're raised in church. And that's not a bad thing. There is an innocence about us. We are harmless as doves, you know. People would read it and be like, you know, I was reading it and it reminded me of 3rd grade. They remember the boy's name. And it just takes them back to those childhood crushes and the first love and all that. And then when married people started reading, 3 babies have come from that book. Wow. One couple had just had a miscarriage. The wife posted on my Facebook wall, girl, that poetry is the bomb. She said, I was reading that poetry to my husband and he started looking at me like, where you been all my life? Got her pregnant. And I didn't realize till later she had just had a miscarriage. And then when I talked to him a couple of years later, I said, yeah, your wife told me about that baby that I said, well, that's a blessing. And he wrote poetry. He writes poetry. He said, yeah, the last 2 babies came from your poetry. I was like, what? But the Lord told me it was going to bless couples. Then I was sharing a couple of years ago with another young lady that from a church we fellowship, and I was telling her about it. She said, yeah, that baby, our baby, your poetry helped us get that baby, and we're working on another one. So it's God's just doing what he said he was going to do. So out of all the pain, God moved his hand, felt like he slapped me across the face. Poetry I wrote for somebody I wasn't married to while I was married, but it was deeper than you sent it. You know what I'm saying? So even that, I didn't have to trash what came out of it. God took it and used it, and it blesses couples. So, and this is very encouraging. These are just, most of them are just prayers. So I've spent too much time here. I do want everyone to just state your name, tell me what you're writing, if you've started.